Hi, how are you? My name is Joseph Clifford. I'm going to host a webinar for you today. Just before we start, I want to wish each and every one of you the best of health, and same goes for your family, friends, relatives, particularly in these very strange times. So let's get back to the webinar. So today we're going to host treating nosebleeds. Are they all equal? Disclaimer. The information contained here should not be used as a substitute for the advice of an appropriately qualified and licensed physician or other healthcare provider. The information provided here is for informational purposes only and the perspective of a Cutman named Joe Clifford, which is me. So this is in context to Cutman stuff, Cutwoman stuff. This is not to replace medical advice, nor is it to replace healthcare practitioners. Anterior and posterior nosebleeds. If you look at the top picture, anterior nosebleed, if you just follow the arrow, anterior nosebleed, you can clearly see that the area which is most commonly traumatized is to the front of the nose. Now, anterior nosebleeds are the most common type of nosebleed in terms of what we experience in combat sports. Now, typically, the blood will flow down and out and across the mouth, so from the top lip down. So these are the most common type that we experience, and they account for about 90% of all nosebleeds. So you can see right up here, okay, it's anteriorly located. Now, just below that, you'll see posterior nosebleeds. Now, there is a difference, a big difference. Posterior nosebleeds are a hell of a lot more serious, and if an athlete has a nosebleed which will not stop bleeding, blood is going into the back of the throat, more than likely it's a posterior nosebleed, but you're not qualified to make that call. You basically refer the athlete back to a healthcare practitioner. That's simple. It's a serious nosebleed. So posterior nosebleeds, you'll see in the bottom right hand corner there, you'll see the location of the bleed. It's further back rather than to the front. As you can see, an anterior nosebleed, it's further back, and blood typically runs into the back of the throat. Now, you'll see a term over here. See where both top and bottom, it says epistaxis. And basically what that is the medical term for nosebleeds. But all we're going to focus on today in terms of treatments, etc., is the top one up here, anterior nosebleeds, because it is the most common and it's the one we most frequently experience. Causes of nosebleeds. So what may predispose an athlete to nosebleeds or frequent nosebleeds? You'll see a list of conditions or a list of causative factors on the left hand side of the page there. Hot, dry, indoor, climate. Basic air conditioning is a big sinner, or inclement weather, hot, dry, where the nasal cavity dries up. Also physically picking your nose, that may actually cause irritation in the actual nasal cavity itself. Deviated septum, that basically happens when the nose is being broken. So when the nose is broken, what happens is the septum, that's the middle part of the nose. You can see it just there. Okay, you'll see that it's pushed over to the left hand side there, or my right, but it's over on the left hand side of this individual's face, on my right there. You just follow the arrow. And so what basically happens, because of the break, because the septum has been moved, the gap narrows, and so the nose loses some of its moisture. Now this is just layman term stuff. Loses some of its moisture, may lose some of its moisture, and therefore may become irritated, and therefore predispose the athlete to more nosebleeds. Colds and allergies, of course. Exposure to irritant chemicals. Now, we're not really in a workplace situation, but if they are involved, if your fighters are involved and they're amateurs or they're professionals, rookie professionals starting out, and they're still maintaining and holding a job, they may be working in an environment where they're exposed to some chemicals. Now, I know we have a protective equipment, but that doesn't say that we're completely protected all the time. And so some chemicals may irritate the actual nasal cavity itself, and they're basically listed. You can see there. Now, one that you probably take for granted is every time you fill your vehicle up with gasoline. Okay, so when we inhale that stuff, that can have an impact. Other things you'd commonly you would commonly be in contact on a day-to-day basis with, again, would be cigarette smoke, or maybe not as much as was typical years ago, but cigarette smoke was one of those things. And that would we boxed when I was a kid. We boxed in halls full of cigarette smoke. So again, that may predispose the individual to nosebleeds. Medical conditions, a predisposition to may give you a predisposition to nosebleeds. Heavy alcohol use. Well, again, we're dealing with athletes, so that doesn't really. But however, yeah, let's be honest about it. As coaches, some athletes do go on Billy benders, on benders in between fights. So again, that may have an impact on nosebleeds. Then medications, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, aspirin, ibuprofen, etc. And then basically homeopathic medications and dietary supplements, believe it or not. Particularly those which would have a predisposition toward blood thinners. You can see a list of them there on the actual bottom of the list. It's homeopathic medications and dietary supplements. But you can see some typical ones there, like ginger, garlic, ginkgo biloba, ginseng, and vitamin E are some of them. And they're ones you would never say, you would never ever suspect as basically a causative factor to nosebleeds, but just something good to know. Just a quick cut tip: nosebleed prevention. In terms of, if you have an athlete that has repeated episodes of nosebleeds, well, then what you can do is you can use a substance called nasogel. And again, just follow your doctor. I'm not trying to replace doctor or healthcare practitioner advice. All I'm trying to do is it was through doing courses and working within medical teams for various boxing organizations and speaking to doctors, that some of the doctors recommended that this is a good substance to use, nasogel. Now, if you can't acquire this in your own country, then just use a piece of grease where the nosebleed occurs, and just place the piece of grease, petroleum jelly, white petroleum jelly, in and around the nostril itself, because part of the reason that you get reoccurring nosebleeds is because the actual the nostril itself, it dries up. So very, very important. So basically, as a preventative measure, you can use the nasogel, and you use it daily, and it's very effective. That's simple. Okay. Sequence. So if you have a sequence, well, it's something you can make reference to time and time again. You can upgrade it, or you can change it to suit your needs, not mine. Change it to suit your needs. So basically, once you have a sequence, then you can go back and evaluate yourself and ask yourself, did I do this from start to finish? And it's a way of examining or enhancing your performance. Just like any high performance model, there needs to be some kind of system or criteria in which you can go back and evaluate yourself. Because if you want to call yourself a professional in this game, well, then be a professional. Don't be an amateur for the rest of your career. In other words, just make it up as you go along. You gotta have a system, and if you have a system, like I said to you, it's your bedrock. So number one, approach. With nosebleeds, always come from an angle. Always come from an angle. Second thing, apply a damp cloth as a compress across the nose. Why are you doing that? And you're pinching, clamping down on the soft part of the nose as you do so. So coming under the bony part of the nose and clamping down on both nostrils. Now remember, we're going to use MMA as a reference. In MMA, the ring, we're going to use that term instead of cage or octagon. We're going to use ring as the platform where the athletes perform. So we're going to meet the athletes in MMA either in the center of the ring or off center. The athletes are fighting when they hear time. Basically, you meet them from that point onwards and walk them back into the corner, something like that. Okay, but from contact, you're treating, you're not wasting time. You're not wasting time. Once you have the athletes sat down, that's ultimate importance. Sit them down. You have more control of the athlete, but you can apply your treatment. Put yourself in the best place possible, given the coach access. Okay, key. you're treating. So what you do is while you compress one nostril, apply the treatment in the nostril that's free, then compress that one, and then apply the treatment in the other nostril. Once that's done, you then clamp down on the nose again. This is again in treatments, and then you start to clean blood spatter. Remember, the blood spatter is not the most important thing that you can do here, cleaning blood spatter away. Not for nosebleed, because generally speaking, the blood will come down across and over the mouth onto the chest of the athlete. Okay, then you can start cleaning up from that point onwards. And lastly, apply your barrier or grease. Okay, tutorial. So we're just going to follow the tutorial. Just have a good listen and look. It'll give you a better idea of how to treat. So I'll just run the tape on from here. Today we're going to treat nosebleeds, or epitaxis, as it's called medically. So the first thing we're going to do is focus only on the nose. Now, we would never ignore that laceration in an event, a combat sport event, never. But today we're just going to focus on the nosebleed, epitaxis. So number one, your approach, it's important always from an angle. We're going to say the event is MMA, the fighter standing in or off center of the ring, which is common. We're going to use the term ring for octagon or cage instead of octagon or cage, so ring. On contact, we want to be treating. So I'm going to make contact with either side of the nostrils and clamp down firmly. Just coming down below the bony part of the nose, cutting off the airway and applying compression. I'm going to walk the athlete back to the corner, then I'm going to sit that athlete down. Now, really important to get them sat down because you have more control over the athlete at that point. From there, now I need to get my treatment in. So I may or may not change my hand position, but I will do so like so. I'll take the cloth away, I'll keep my tongue clamped down on the left nostril. And with this hand, while it's free, I'll apply my treatment up and in to the nostril. Now I clamp that down with my index finger. I can take the cloth away, keeping some pressure on the nostril while I place it just there between my little finger and my third finger, like so. I'll take my next piece of treatment, release my thumb, and I place that treatment into the nostril. I'll twist and push like so, and then again I'll clamp down on either nostril, cutting off the airway and applying compression. Now, while I'm doing this, remember, we want to treat for as long as we possibly can. I can now clean away blood spatter. Okay, I can clean away blood spatter. Again, using my little finger just to trap that piece of cloth. I can take my piece of grease, roll it between my index finger and my thumb, and then I can use that grease across the contours of the face. And then toward the end of that 35 to 40 seconds, you need to remove your treatment like so. I can finish off greasing around the contours of the face and across the nose, which is ultimately important. And then you are gone before you hear seconds away. A simple treatment. So the reason why I use MMA as an example is because the athlete is generally in the center or off center in terms of the ring. And just as explained, we use the term ring instead of octagon or cage. So as a universal term, ring. So it's where the athletes compete. So unlike boxing, where you make contact with the boxer when they're sitting down, the majority of times, in mixed martial arts, you make contact with the athlete. They may be off center or center of the ring itself, and you have to treat from the time that you make contact with that athlete and then walk them back to their still. Otherwise, you're wasting time. It's critical. We've got such a short period of time to treat, and nosebleeds can be quite problematic. So get on them as fast as you possibly can. That's key. Just get on them as fast as you possibly can. It's a little bit different for boxing or other sports, but anyway, let's keep the focus on MMA. So now I'm going to show you real time. So now we're going to look at it in real time. Now, if you look at just a little bit of script on the left-hand side, real time, underneath is the approach. You'll see the approach, the sequence. Underneath, you'll see the sequence, the approach. Apply damp sterile gauze on contact. Remember, MMA is different to boxing because you'll meet the athlete in the ring rather than sitting on the still. Your treatment, clean blood spatter barrier. Okay. Let's go back. Let's look at it in real time so we can get a better view. So I'll just play it on. Now I was in Mark's corner. That's the African kid with the red stripe down the hair. Now he took a lot of trauma to the face in the last 10 seconds. Now what's key? I'll just stop it for a second. What's key as a cut person is always to be prepped. 100% always to be prepped. You shouldn't be getting your kit ready when you see the athlete being injured. It should be ready already. You should have that prepped, ready to go. Poor performances with cut people when we're working in a supervisory role generally comes down to poor preparation. So you need to check everything, make sure it's all suited and booted, ready to go. But when you're sitting down ringside, what's key to this? What is key to this is that you stay focused on the job at hand and you have your kit prepped. I'm going to play it on. Now I meet the athlete. I come at the athlete from an angle. Job done. Now just for a moment I lose control. Luckily enough for me, when I say lose control, he turned his back to me, but he spoke English and I'm speaking to him. Please turn around and sit down. Now, if he did not speak English, what I need to do is use non-verbal cues, using my body to turn the athlete. For me, just that moment in terms of working and performance, I could have done better. I may have been able to put my hand underneath his shoulder and then basically turn him like so. But just for that moment, I lost control of his body position. So basically that's not where I want to be. However, I do have his nose, and that's the most important part. I'm still making contact with the injury. I still clamp down on the nose. I'm not letting go. So I'll just play it on from there. And as he sits, straight away, what I do is get rid of the towel out of my hand and I place it on a body part. Now you can place between your fingers or on a body part. I got the first treatment in, that's the second one in, and then I'll go cleaning the blood spatter. But the most important thing is you're treating from contact. So I'll just have a quick look around, and then basically I'm applying the grease while the camera flips back into the opposite corner. Now if you look at it, say from this point onwards. Okay. And I'll stop it just there. So you can see it now in real time. And you've got to get this down, and you've got to get that 1 minute in your head down. You need to know it off by heart, upside down. It should be an instinct. An instinct. Okay. So anterior nosebleed. You have two pictures, one on your left and one on your right. Which one is the correct way to treat? So let's focus on the one on the right for a second. We're going to break this down piece by piece in terms of performance. Now, it's not a good position to tilt an athlete's head back if you are treating a nosebleed, because what you're doing is encouraging blood to flow back and down into the throat, where the athlete may swallow it and they may vomit. Okay, that's the first point. In terms of where that athlete is, this may be the end of the fight, so it doesn't really matter. But even if it is the end of the fight, you are encouraged in MMA to bring the athlete back to the corner if you are going to treat, rather than treating them in the center of the ring. Okay, bring them back to the corner. So again, head is tilted back. You've already cut an airway off. Now you're restricting the other airway, the only airway that the athlete can breathe, through their mouth. Okay. From this position, both your hands are tied up. I know there's one free here. You could take that away to clean away blood spatter. But what you've got is a situation where there are two swabs up the nose, and you can see those swabs hanging down like so. Now, if this was between rounds and this coach wanted to give water, it's no longer an option because the two swabs are blocking his passage. Now, I've seen Cutmen move the swabs out into a Y shape like so, so the athlete can receive water from the coach, but it's a little bit awkward. And what I tend to use instead is a substance called nasal wool. Nasal wool is an alginate. It can absorb up to 100 times its own body weight when it's inserted into the nasal cavities. When it makes contact with blood, it expands and it releases calcium ions, which encourage blood clotting. So it's a genius substance to use, an absolute genius substance to use. And you can leave, if you have a heavy bleed, you can leave one of them up there off the record. It's not what you usually do. You're not encouraged to do it. If the referee sees you doing it, remember at the end of the break, between rounds, you have to remove the substances from the nose. But in this case, if you had a heavy bleed, let's just say off the record, I'd probably leave one up there. Now, you're probably going to ask the question, has anybody ever ingested one? No, they haven't, to my knowledge so far. But you've got to make them big enough that they can't be swallowed or sucked backwards into the nasal cavity. And if you make them too big, well, then the problem is that they probably won't fit into a nasal cavity. Now remember, there is a difference here. If you're treating somebody of African origin, they have wider nostrils than somebody of Caucasian who may have narrower nasal cavities. So just keep that in mind. You need to practice. All noses are not the same. They're all different in terms of the width of the nasal cavity. So again, a Cutman tip. If you are treating an athlete, make sure you make, generally as a rule of thumb, if I am using nasal wool, I will make them 5 centimeters or 2 inches long. I'll fold them in half and then twist them up into small bullets, and I'll place them in my cup person wristband. Now let's go back to the photograph on the right again. So the head is tilted back, should be in the corner regardless if the fight's over, should be brought back to the corner. The head's tilted back, blood flow may go back in restricted. The coach can't give water because there's two swabs hanging over the mouth, unlike the picture on your left hand side. Now what I can do with my free hand is remove that, okay, but still the coach can come over my arm, my bent elbow, and give Katrin water. This is Katrin Koskin, a consummate professional, and she was very good. Now what I did was I backed her up against the cage, kept her head neutral, slightly tilted her forward. That's what I'm doing with my hand here, so I'm encouraging her to tilt her head slightly forward. I'll take that arm away. If I need to grease, I can do so just on one side of the face, and the coach can gain access here. Remember, if this is claustrophobic for the athlete, I can change my hand position. That's key. Remember, the athlete is king or queen. We need to put them first at all times. So if they're panicking a little bit and it's uncomfortable, adjust as it happens. You need to adjust as it happens. You need to change the way you're doing business as it's happening. So if the athlete moves, you need to go with them. Okay, so the picture on the left would be a more suitable way to treat than the picture on the right. So in summary, prevention is better than cure, right? So basically, if you have a kid in your gym who repeatedly suffers from episodes of nosebleeds, remember that you can, and again, I'm not trying to replace physician or healthcare practitioner advice, but these are some of the substances on the market. Nasal gel, where you can spray it into the nose daily, or you can use white petroleum jelly, just rubbing it around the inside of the nasal cavity, again, to keep it moist, and that will help in terms of prevention of nosebleeds. However, if you are involved in athletic, amateur, or professional sport, you cannot be 100% contactless free. So in other words, you're going to take some trauma to the face at some point and you may get a nosebleed. Remember, just follow the sequence. Keep it simple. I can't say it enough, just keep it simple. Your approach is key. Always come at nosebleeds at an angle. Apply a damp cloth as a compress for 5 seconds across the nose. Now we're talking about MMA, and the reason we're talking about MMA is because you generally meet the athlete in the ring, off center or in center, after when the round ends, and you have to walk them back to the still. Now, rather than wasting time, make contact with that injury immediately. Okay, so you're actually treating on contact. Then once you've done that, when you sit the athlete down, immediately you apply your treatment and compress, so you're still treating non-stop. Then we clean the blood spatter away, and then the last thing we do is apply grease. And I can't reiterate enough, applying grease is not the most important thing, it's the nosebleed. Okay, now nosebleeds are hard to treat within a 45-second time frame, 50-second time frame, and the reason for that's quite simple. Generally, the nose itself has a plexus or a network of blood vessels, and so very dense, high volume of blood vessels. So when you get nosebleeds, and if it is heavy, it can, you know, your objective may be to stem the flow of blood, to reduce the flow of blood, because you may not be lucky enough, or you may not have time to completely stop the flow of blood from the nose itself. So just keep that in mind. Our job is to stop blood for sure, but if we can slow it down or reduce it to a trickle, it's job done. It's a good job, because what you've done is reduce the discomfort to the athlete. So just keep that in mind. Last thing, Joe Clifford, coming to you from Dublin, Ireland, sharing some cut tips with you, free webinars. Remember, these are only small snippets of the online cut course coming to you. Unfortunately, we had to stop filming the cut course because of COVID-19. Again, I wish you and your family all the best. Stay healthy, stay well, stay safe, stay at home. If you're out and about right now, or your country allows you to do so, just be careful, folks, okay? Because this disease is a killer. Okay, other than that, take care of yourself. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to us. That's on YouTube. That's Minute Medicine Man channel. Just click a like. Don't forget, comments are welcome. Get on it like a car bonnet. Talk to you all soon. Next week, we got the analyzing performance. So keep that in mind. I'll show you how to break down and analyze your performance. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.